My name's Madison Hart, and I'm 28 years old, living in Chicago. By day, I'm a senior financial consultant. By night, apparently, I'm the family's unpaid therapist, emergency fund, and full-time fixer. Everyone calls me the Rock, the girl who always keeps her head while everyone else falls apart. And for a long time, I let them. I paid off my brother's tuition after he partied his scholarship away. I picked up my dad's $60,000 miss when he lost everything investing in a can't-miss crypto scheme. I paid off mom's maxed-out credit cards without her even asking how I was doing. I used to really believe family is family. You keep showing up. You keep giving, no matter what. Until one day you realize you're the only one bleeding for people who don't even notice you're bleeding out. It started last Thursday. I got a text from Mom. "Hey, Maddie, swing by the house at 6 p.m. We've got something special for you." For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. Special? Coming from my mom, Ellen Hart, special usually meant disaster in a shiny bow. The last special surprise had been a family intervention to guilt me into co-signing a loan for my brother Tanner's next big startup, 6 months after his last company belly flopped. Still, I pulled up in front of the house that evening. The same beige suburban 2-story I had helped them buy. Of course, not that my name was anywhere on the mortgage. From the outside, it looked cozy. Warm lights, laughter spilling from the windows. Inside, it felt like walking into an ambush. The second I stepped through the door, Mom swooped in, wearing way too much red lipstick and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise!" she squealed, dragging me into the living room. Relatives spilled out of every corner. Uncle Dave, Aunt Judy, even my cousin Vanessa, who only shows up when there's a chance of free food or gift bags. They all shouted in unison, "Happy early birthday, Maddie!" I forced a smile. "Oh, wow! You guys really caught me off guard," I said, because what else do you say when your gut is screaming something's wrong? Dad hustled over, pressing a cocktail into my hand. "Your favorite sour apple gin martini." I hadn't touched gin since a blackout incident in college. But hey, they were trying, right? Right? Mom guided me to the center of the room, where a leather-bound folder sat neatly on the coffee table. My eyes narrowed. Documents at a party? Never a good sign. Before I could ask, Dad raised his glass in a rushed toast. "To Maddie, our shining star, the one who always comes through for this family." People clapped, cheered. I stared at the folder. Then, against every screaming instinct, I reached for it. The title on the first page made my blood run cold. Asset Transfer Agreement. Louise Hart Family Trust. I flipped it open. The first sentence hit harder than any toast. I, Madison Claire Hart, hereby voluntarily relinquish all rights, claims, and entitlements to the Louise Hart Family Trust, effective immediately. The room spun a little. I looked up, meeting my mother's too bright gaze. "What exactly is this?" Mom laughed a little too hard. "Just boring paperwork, sweetheart. For taxes. You don't need to worry." Tax purposes. Right. Because nothing says birthday celebration like secretly signing away your inheritance. I set the folder down hard. I'd like to read it properly. The laughter and chatter in the room died immediately. Hunter coughed into his hand. Vanessa fidgeted with her phone. Even Dad's face tightened. "Madison," Mom said, voice syrupy. "Don't ruin the mood, honey. Everyone's here to celebrate you." I picked the folder back up and leafed through the pages. Temporary power of attorney. Asset transfer authorization. Trust amendment notice. All of it designed to neatly funnel everything my grandmother, my late Grandma Louise, had left me into Mom and Dad's hands. Everyone had already signed. Tanner, Vanessa, Uncle Dave. They had agreed I should just give it away. I closed the folder and looked around the room, at people who had cheered for me, smiled at me, all while setting up a legal mugging. "You know," I said quietly, "Grandma used to tell me to always trust my gut when something felt off." No one moved. No one spoke. I set the folder down carefully, like it was something diseased. "I'm not signing," I said simply. Mom's face cracked. Dad set down his drink with a heavy clink. Tanner actually groaned. "You're making a scene," Mom hissed. I smiled, sweet as pie. "No, Mom." "You made the scene. I'm just refusing to perform in it." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. I was just done. Done being the safety net. Done being the bank. Done being the idiot who thought loyalty meant sacrifice. Before I turned to leave, Mom grabbed my arm, nails digging into my coat sleeve. "If you don't sign, Madison," she said, her voice low and sharp, "there will be consequences." I met her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. "I've lived with your consequences my whole life, Mom. Guess what? I survived." I pried her fingers off, one by one, and walked out the door. No guilt, no second guessing. Just the clean, terrifying air of freedom hitting me full in the face. Outside, my best friend Ray was waiting by her beat-up old Subaru, arms crossed and engine running. She didn't ask questions, just nodded once, sharp and sure. "You good?" she asked when I slid into the passenger seat. I stared straight ahead, throat thick, heart pounding. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." And for the first time, I actually believed it. The cold air bit through my coat as Ray pulled away from the curb, the house shrinking behind us until it was nothing but another glowing dot in a line of identical suburbs. I sat stiffly, hands clenched in my lap, mind racing so fast it felt like I couldn't catch my breath. They had planned that ambush for weeks, maybe months, smiling to my face while lining up the knives for my back. And for what? So I could hand over the last gift Grandma Louise had left me, a gift she had trusted me with when no one else in the family had even bothered to show up for her final days. I stared out the window at the blur of passing streetlights and tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it stayed lodged there like a splinter I couldn't dig out. "You know they were never going to stop," Ray said finally, her voice calm in the dark car. "They were always going to keep taking until you had nothing left." I nodded silently because deep down I had known it too. I just never had the courage to admit it. Not until tonight. As we crossed into the city, Ray flicked on the heater and glanced at me. "You said something about Grandma's lawyer, right? Before all this?" I pulled out my phone, the last message my grandmother ever sent me, still saved like a little lighthouse in the chaos. "If anything ever feels wrong, go see Gerald Cross. He'll help you understand." It had barely made sense at the time. Now it was starting to sound like a lifeline. "I need to see him," I said, feeling my voice strengthen a little. "Tomorrow." Ray nodded, and just like that, the decision was made. No second guessing, no more stalling. I wasn't going to let them rob me in broad daylight while smiling like it was a family tradition. I was done playing the good daughter, the reliable sister, the dependable safety net. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what Grandma Louise had left behind and why she'd known I might need a backup plan. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, that expectant crowd waiting for me to hand over everything without a fight. But by morning, the anger had burned away the fear, leaving something cleaner behind. Focus. Gerald's office was tucked inside a weathered brick building downtown, the kind of place you walked past 100 times without noticing unless you knew it was there. I arrived 15 minutes early, nerves jangling in my chest, and forced myself to sit still in the small waiting room with its leather chairs and dusty magazine piles. When Gerald Cross finally appeared, he wasn't what I expected. Short, neat, gray hair, thick glasses that magnified kind eyes. He shook my hand firmly and ushered me into a wood-paneled office that smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. "Madison," he said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Your grandmother spoke very highly of you." My throat tightened, but I managed a small smile. She told me to come see you, that you'd help me." Gerald nodded and opened a file already waiting on his desk. "She anticipated this situation," he said gently. "She left very specific instructions, for your eyes only." He slid a thick envelope across the desk. My name was written on it in my grandmother's familiar looping script. Hands trembling slightly, I tore it open and found a USB drive inside, along with a short handwritten letter. "Madison, if you're seeing this, it means you chose yourself." "Good." Now here's the truth they were hoping you'd never find out. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Can I watch it now?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Gerald smiled kindly and plugged the USB into his laptop, turning the screen so I could see. The video flickered to life. And there she was, Grandma Louise, sitting in her favorite armchair by the bay window, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but steady. "If you're watching this, my sweet Maddie, then you stood up for yourself. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry this is how it had to happen, but you need to know they were planning to take it all." She explained everything in a voice that was heartbreakingly matter-of-fact. The trust she had left was structured in a way that if I ever signed away my rights under pressure or deceit, the entire inheritance, every penny, would be redirected to a list of charities she had personally chosen. No second chances, no backdoor deals. It was airtight. They will tell you it's about taxes, convenience, unity. They will guilt you. They will make you doubt yourself. Don't let them. Her eyes bored into the camera, fierce even at the end. "You are not selfish for protecting what's yours. You are honoring me by standing your ground." Tears blurred my vision, but I kept watching as she held up a second document. "And if things get ugly," she said, her mouth tightening into a grim line, "show them this. The original trust, recorded and notarized. They cannot break it without breaking themselves." Gerald paused the video then, giving me time to breathe. "Everything is still intact," he said quietly. "They have no legal grounds to force you unless you voluntarily give it up. And judging by what you told me about last night, I'd say you made the right call." I stared at the blank screen, the weight of everything sinking in. Grandma had known. She had seen the cracks long before I was willing to, and she had given me a weapon they didn't even know existed. "There's one more thing," Gerald said, pulling out another envelope. "This one marked confidential." She left a second recording. "For them." I looked up sharply. "For the family?" He nodded. She knew there might come a time when they needed to hear it from her own mouth. "If you choose to share it, you can. If not, that's your decision." I sat there, the two envelopes in my lap, feeling the full gravity of what Grandma had left me. Not just money, not just property. She had left me a choice, the power to decide who deserved to be part of my future and who didn't. Driving home later, Ray and I talked through 100 different ideas. Send them the recording anonymously? Hire a lawyer to deliver it officially? But the more I thought about it, the clearer the answer became. They had tried to corner me with a surprise party. It was only fitting that I give them a surprise of my own. "I'm going to invite them over," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "One more gathering, one they'll never forget." Ray glanced over at me, a slow grin spreading across her face. "You're gonna make them watch it, aren't you?" I nodded. "In my apartment. On my terms. No tricks. No way to twist it around later. They'll hear it straight from her, and then they'll know exactly how badly they screwed up." Ray laughed under her breath. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I smiled grimly, feeling something unfamiliar bubbling up in my chest. Not fear, not guilt, power. That night, I sent out a group text. "Hey everyone, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Let's meet at my place tomorrow at 5 p.m. I want to clear the air." Within minutes, replies flooded in. "Mom, so proud of you, honey. We knew you'd come around." "Dad, see you soon, sweetheart." "Tanner, glad you're being reasonable now." I sat back on my couch and stared at the phone, feeling a strange, calm clarity settle over me. They still thought they had won. They had no idea the ground was about to drop out from under them. Tomorrow, they would walk into my home expecting surrender. Instead, they would walk straight into the truth. And for once, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. I would be the one holding the script. The next morning, I woke up early, way earlier than usual for a Saturday, heart hammering like I had an exam I hadn't studied for. I barely touched my coffee, hands too jittery to hold the cup steady, and instead paced my tiny apartment, imagining every way this could blow up. Maybe they would storm out halfway through. Maybe they'd scream, accuse me of manipulation, gaslight me until I second-guessed every decision I had made. But every time that doubt slithered into my chest, I remembered Grandma's voice on that video, steady and unwavering, telling me that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. By 4:30, Ray showed up, carrying a borrowed mini projector from her office, a box of pastries she had clearly stress-baked at 3 in the morning, and 2 giant travel mugs of tea. We moved the coffee table to the side and set up the projector facing the blank white wall above my couch. Clean, bright, no distractions. Just the truth, waiting to be played. 5 o'clock sharp, The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my sweater, and opened the door to find my mother standing there in a soft pink dress, like she was headed to Sunday brunch, her makeup flawless, her smile wide and brittle. Behind her came my father, stiff in a navy blazer he only wore for court dates and funerals, and Tanner, hands jammed deep into his jeans pockets, avoiding my gaze like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. I stepped aside and let them in without a word. My pulse steady now, my fear burned off by purpose. "Thanks for coming," I said, voice calm, almost clinical. "Please, sit." They perched on the couch like they owned the place, their eyes darting around the room, searching for signs of weakness, of apology, of surrender. Finding none, my mother finally cleared her throat and said, "We're just happy you're willing to talk things through. You've always been the level-headed one, Maddie." She patted my knee like she still thought she could steer this ship if she used enough fake sweetness. I smiled thinly, walked over to my laptop, and hit play. The room filled instantly with the image of Grandma Louise, seated in her armchair, looking straight into the camera with those sharp, kind eyes that could see right through your soul. "If you're seeing this," she said, her voice both gentle and unyielding, "then my granddaughter refused to be bullied." "Good, because this message is not for her, it's for you. I didn't look at them." I didn't need to. I could feel the atmosphere shift, the easy, smug tension draining into confusion, unease. "I know what you tried to do," Grandma said, her tone sharpening. "I know about the late-night meetings, the whispered plans to pressure Madison into signing away what was rightfully hers. I know about the forged documents you drafted, the fake tax consultations you arranged, the way you planned to call it a gift when it was theft in every sense of the word." My father stiffened. Tanner shifted uncomfortably. My mother's hand clenched into the fabric of her dress. Still, no one spoke. "I left everything to Madison because she earned it," Grandma continued. "Not through money or favors, but through kindness, loyalty, and integrity. If you attempt to coerce her, threaten her, guilt her, or otherwise manipulate her, the trust's automatic failsafe will activate. All assets will bypass the family entirely and be donated to the charities I named." I watched it land, watched it sink in like a slow-moving bomb. The certainty, the finality. There would be no second chances, no renegotiations, only loss, only consequences. "And to my sweet Madison," Grandma said, her voice softening, "if you had to play this video, it means they chose greed over love, it means they never deserved you, and it means you're free." The screen went black. Silence pressed against the walls like a living thing. For a moment, no one moved. Then my mother spoke, her voice trembling with outrage barely held in check. "This isn't fair." She didn't understand. She was old. She was confused. I cut her off, my voice like steel. She was sharper than any of you gave her credit for. She saw right through you. Dad leaned forward, palms open like a man trying to negotiate a hostage situation. "Maddie, listen. We're family. Family looks out for each other." I laughed then, a short, humorless sound that seemed to ricochet off the walls. "You didn't want to look out for me. You wanted to empty me out like a bank account and then pat yourselves on the back for calling it love." Tanner finally found his voice, low and defensive. "It was just business, Maddie." "You're being emotional." "No," I said, standing up, feeling the power surge back into my spine. "It was betrayal, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I walked over to the folder sitting neatly on my side table, the one Gerald had prepared for me, the one that contained every document, every signed trust condition, every legal confirmation of my ownership. I placed it on the coffee table in front of them like a final nail in a coffin. "Here's the paperwork confirming everything you just heard. And just so we're clear, if any of you contest it, threaten me, harass me, or try to take what isn't yours, I will trigger the secondary clause. Half of everything will go straight to charity without a single cent landing in your pockets." My mother's face was a study in barely concealed rage. My father's jaw twitched. Tanner looked like he might be sick. "You've lost," I said quietly, "and you have no one to blame but yourselves." They didn't leave right away. There were attempts at guilt trips, at frantic justifications, at half-hearted apologies that felt like bargaining chips thrown on a table already cleared. I stayed silent, arms crossed, watching them twist in the realization that their golden goose had flown the coop. When they finally stood, gathering their coats with stiff, jerky movements, my mother paused at the door, looking back at me with something almost like real sadness. "We're still your family, Maddie," she said. I met her eyes, feeling nothing but a strange, exhausted pity. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not yours anymore." When the door clicked shut behind them, I sagged onto the couch, every muscle shaking from the adrenaline finally draining out of me. Ray came out of the kitchen where she had been quietly lurking, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She passed me one without a word and flopped down next to me. "You did it," she said finally, voice awed. I nodded slowly. "I didn't just save what Grandma left me," I whispered. "I saved myself." We sat there for a long time, sipping tea, watching the night settle in through the big windows. Outside, the city buzzed on, oblivious. Inside, for the first time in years, I felt light, untethered, free. Tomorrow, there would be more to do. Legal filings, financial account transfers, board meetings. 1,000 small steps into this new life I was carving out for myself. But tonight I let myself sit in the quiet, in the peace that had cost me so much to earn. Grandma had trusted me to be strong enough to walk away from people who would rather see me empty than see me happy. And for the first time in my life, I had proved her right. I didn't owe them my guilt. I didn't owe them my loyalty. I didn't owe them anything. The only thing I owed was to myself, to live fully, fiercely, and unapologetically free. And that's exactly what I plan to do. The following Monday, I stood in front of a heavy oak door with a brass plaque that read Langston and Hart Financial Group, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This company had been my grandmother's pride, her life's work, and now it was mine whether I felt ready or not. I pushed the door open and stepped into a polished lobby filled with muted conversations, clacking heels, and the low hum of productivity. It smelled like old paper, fresh coffee, and opportunity. Gerald was already waiting for me by the reception desk, holding a thick binder under one arm. He smiled, and for the first time in days, it didn't feel like someone was pretending. "Morning, Madison," he said warmly. "You ready?" I wasn't sure if anyone was ever ready for something like this, but I nodded anyway. Together, we walked into the main conference room where the leadership team had gathered, men and women who had once reported to my father, people who probably thought I was just a background figure, the silent granddaughter who handled numbers but never made noise. They looked up when I entered, polite but skeptical, the way people do when they're trying to guess whether you're about to sink or swim. Gerald set the binder down at the head of the table and cleared his throat. "As of today, Madison Hart assumes full controlling ownership of Langston and Hart, as per the terms outlined in Louise Hart's final trust agreement." A few people shifted uncomfortably. A couple glanced at each other. One man, a VP whose name I couldn't even remember, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms like he was daring me to say something worth listening to. I didn't flinch. I opened the binder, found the page I had bookmarked, and began to speak. I told them about my plans to review all financial practices, to modernize our outdated processes, to create transparency and accountability, not just at the top, but across the board. I made it clear that anyone still loyal to the old ways, the casual favoritism, the handshake deals, the expenses swept under the rug would find themselves very uncomfortable in the months ahead. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I just laid out the facts, calmly, confidently, the way Grandma had taught me when I was barely tall enough to see over her kitchen counter, and she explained compound interest using cookie jars. When I finished, the room was silent for a long beat. Then, slowly, the head of HR, a woman named Lisa, who had worked under Grandma for 20 years, smiled and tapped the table twice in approval. Others followed. It wasn't thunderous applause. It was something better. Respect, given grudgingly but given all the same. After the meeting, Gerald pulled me aside. "You did good," he said simply. And coming from a man who had watched my grandmother navigate boardrooms full of sharks, it meant more than 1,000 empty congratulations. Taking over wasn't a magic fix, though. Over the next 2 weeks, fallout rained down like clockwork. My parents, realizing they had lost their golden goose, started playing a new game, public sympathy. Instagram posts dripping with vague sadness about daughters who abandoned their poor, aging parents, subtweets about loyalty and betrayal, teary voicemails from my mother about how family was everything and how could I be so heartless. Tanner posting pictures of his beat-up car, making sure everyone saw that he couldn't afford to fix it because of certain selfish choices someone made. It would have hurt once. It used to hook into my ribs and twist, guilt tightening like a noose every time they pulled that card. But now, I saw it for what it was: desperation, not love, not grief. Just panic from people who had never learned to live without taking from others. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I let them spin their stories into the void because the truth didn't need me to fight for it anymore. It already stood on its own, solid and unmoving. Instead, I threw myself into building something better. I set up weekly all-hands meetings at Langston and Hart to open up communication channels that had been dead for years. I created anonymous reporting tools for unethical practices. I started a new mentorship program aimed at helping entry-level employees climb faster without needing to curry favor with the old boys club. Slowly, things began to shift. People smiled more, laughed easier. The tension that had once wrapped around the office like barbed wire started to loosen. One evening after a long board meeting, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, looking out over the city lights shimmering like a million tiny promises. Ray joined me, holding 2 cups of terrible break room coffee. "So," she said, handing me one, "how does it feel to be the boss?" I took a sip and made a face. "Terrifying, exhausting, kinda incredible." She laughed. "Good, you deserve every bit of it." We stood there for a while in companionable silence, watching the skyline pulse with life. And even though my feet ached, and my brain felt like it was leaking out of my ears from the sheer number of decisions I had made that day, I felt something new building inside me, a quiet, steady pride. Not the kind you have to shout about, the kind that hums under your skin, warm and sure. It wasn't just about the money or the title or the corner office. It was about the fact that, for once, I was building something that couldn't be taken from me with a fake smile and a legal trick. I had earned every brick, every beam. I had bled and fought and clawed for it. And no one, no family member, no manipulative plea for forgiveness, no passive-aggressive Facebook post was going to make me feel guilty for standing on the foundation I had built with my own 2 hands. The weeks rolled on and the smear campaigns slowly lost steam. Even the most loyal gossip mongers can only feast on the same drama for so long before they get bored and move on. I focused on the real work, the people who mattered, the future I was carving out of the ashes of the past, and somewhere along the way, I stopped checking my phone for new attacks. I stopped worrying about who believed what. I stopped needing their approval like I once had needed air. Grandma had seen it all coming. She had planned not just for my financial security, but for my emotional liberation. She had built a bridge and dared me to walk across it. And now, with every step forward, I left behind the chains that had once kept me tied to a definition of family that only ever meant sacrifice without love. One late Friday night, long after everyone had left and the office lights dimmed to a low golden hum, I sat at my desk and opened the last envelope. Gerald had given me a handwritten letter from Grandma, the ink faint, the paper soft from being folded and unfolded who knows how many times. "Dear Maddie," it began, "I know you think you're alone in this. I know you're afraid that standing up for yourself means losing everything. But listen to me, darling. The ones who love you will never need you to shrink to fit their needs. The ones worth keeping will celebrate your strength, not punish it." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I even realized it. Not heavy sobs, but a slow, steady letting go. I read her words again and again until they were etched into my bones. Then I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the top drawer of my desk, and locked it away, not because I needed to hide it, but because it was part of me now, stitched into every decision I would make moving forward. I didn't win back my family. I didn't repair the rift or patch up the broken places. But I wasn't broken anymore either. I was something else, something better, stronger, whole. And for the first time, I wasn't surviving my life. I was living it. The first big project I launched under the Langston and Hart name wasn't some flashy acquisition or aggressive market expansion like the old regime would have done. It was the Louise Hart Foundation, a nonprofit fully funded by a percentage of the firm's profits, designed to offer free financial education to young adults and survivors of financial abuse. I spent weeks designing the framework, pulling late nights, running through logistics with Ray over bad diner coffee until both our eyes burned. It felt right, building something that wasn't just about stacking more money on top of a mountain, but about giving people the tools to build mountains of their own. Every time the board pushed back, every time someone sneered about wasting company funds on charity, I stood my ground, planting my flag in the values Grandma had taught me when no one else was looking. By the time the foundation's launch event rolled around, we had a full roster of programs lined up: workshops on budgeting, debt recovery clinics, small business grants for women and minority entrepreneurs. I stood at the front of the conference room, wearing a simple black dress and my grandmother's old silver locket, and watched as people trickled in. Not the high-rolling donors my parents would have courted, but real people, students, single parents, entrepreneurs with calloused hands and hope in their eyes. The kind of people Grandma would have wanted us to stand beside. As I welcomed everyone, Ray snapped a picture from the back of the room, and when I saw it later, I hardly recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like someone who belonged. A few days after the launch, I received an email from the foundation's website. The sender's name made my stomach tighten: Vanessa Hart, my cousin. One of the faces I remembered most vividly from that night. They tried to rob me with a leather folder and fake smiles. The message was short. "Hi, Maddie. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I saw what you're building. I'd like to volunteer if you'll have me." I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no apology, no attempt to explain the betrayal, just a simple offer to help. Old anger flickered at the edges of my mind, but it didn't catch fire like it used to. I had made my peace with the past. Now I had to decide what kind of future I wanted to build. I typed a reply that surprised even me. "Come to orientation next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Everyone gets a fresh start here if they're willing to work for it." I hit send without overthinking it, trusting my instincts the way Grandma had taught me. Maybe Vanessa had changed. Maybe she hadn't. Either way, I wasn't building a world where grudges held the power anymore. I was building a world where people had to show up, do the work, and earn their place. The following week, Vanessa showed up on time, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, no jewelry flashing. She didn't try to hug me or fake some grand reconciliation. She just listened carefully as I went over the orientation materials, asked smart questions when appropriate, and quietly signed up for shifts wherever we needed extra hands. Watching her fill out the volunteer forms without asking for special treatment, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't always a grand ceremony. Sometimes it's just giving someone the chance to be better without demanding they grovel for it. Not long after that, I got another unexpected message, this time from Tanner. It came through LinkedIn, of all places, which felt so laughably formal I almost thought it was spam at first. "Hey, Madison. I was wondering if you had time to meet. I know I have no right to ask, but I'd like to talk, in person." I sat there for a while, rereading it, weighing the risks. Part of me wanted to delete it without answering. Another part, the stubborn part that had spent years believing in second chances long after it stopped making sense, hesitated. I agreed to meet him at a neutral spot, a small coffee shop halfway between my office and the suburbs. Ray insisted on coming with me and sitting at a different table, pretending to be absorbed in her laptop just in case things got ugly. I didn't argue. Better safe than blindsided again. Tanner was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket, looking smaller somehow, like the years of coasting on charm and family connections had finally caught up to him. He stood when he saw me, looking nervous. I nodded toward the seat across from me. "Sit." For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. The hum of espresso machines and quiet conversations filled the space between us. Finally, Tanner took a deep breath. "Look, I'm not here to ask for money," he said quickly, hands up like he was surrendering. I know I burned that bridge. Hell, I blew it up and salted the earth. I said nothing, just waited. He swallowed hard. I wanted you to know I get it now. What we did, how wrong it was. And I'm sorry. Not because it cost me anything, but because you deserved better from us. From me. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years of manipulation. The nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why being good was never enough to be loved right. But it mattered, because it wasn't about winning me back. It was about finally seeing me. Really seeing me. I nodded slowly. "I'm not angry anymore, Tanner," I said, and it was the truth. "But I'm not coming back either. You'll have to live with who you were, and I'll live with who I've become." He nodded, eyes shining a little, and for once he didn't argue. He just accepted it. When I left the coffee shop, the sky was streaked with pink and gold, the city buzzing quietly beneath it. I found Ray leaning against her car, arms crossed, watching me carefully. "You good?" she asked. I smiled, feeling something lift off my chest that had been weighing me down for years. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." That night, back at my apartment, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the stars come out one by one. The girl who once would have done anything to earn her family's approval felt like a ghost now, a shadow fading into the background. In her place was someone stronger, someone who understood that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just control dressed up in pretty words. I thought about Grandma and the trust she had placed in me, not just legally but emotionally. She had known that one day I would need to stand alone, to face the people who once defined me and say, "Enough." I thought about the foundation and the people who showed up every week hungry to build better futures. I thought about Vanessa sorting donation boxes without fanfare, about Tanner facing his own reflection for the first time, about Ray always showing up no matter what. Maybe family isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who shows up when you stop making it easy to take from you. Maybe it's about who celebrates your boundaries instead of resenting them. Maybe it's about who still stands beside you when you finally choose yourself. I didn't know what the future would bring. There would be more hard conversations, more people who disappointed me, more moments when trusting again would feel like holding my hand over a flame. But I knew this. I would never again trade my peace for someone else's comfort. I would never again shrink to fit into a space too small for who I was becoming. I finished my tea, closed the window, and turned off the lights. In the darkness, the city outside glittered like 1,000 small promises. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to save me. I was already saved. I had saved myself. And that was enough. The foundation didn't just exist on paper anymore. It lived and breathed inside a small renovated office space downtown, tucked between a family-owned bookstore and a battered cafe where the coffee was bad, but the dreams were big. I named it after Grandma because it felt right to give her more than just a plaque. It felt right to give her legacy a future she would have been proud of. Every morning, I unlocked the front door, flipped the little open sign, and smiled at the sight of volunteers bustling around with stacks of budgeting guides and college scholarship applications. The Louise Hart Foundation wasn't just a place. It was a quiet rebellion against every voice that had ever told people like me we were only valuable when we were useful to someone else. We held workshops on debt recovery, ran emergency funds for women escaping financial abuse, hosted free classes teaching teenagers how to understand credit, taxes, savings, all the things nobody had ever explained when I was young and scared and too proud to ask for help. I didn't do it alone. Ray practically moved into the building with me, helping hammer together tables, paint peeling walls, drag in secondhand chairs from local donations. Our first official employee was a woman named Amara, who used to work 3 jobs just to stay afloat after her divorce. And every time she smiled at a client walking out with a new financial plan clutched in their hands, I knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Some nights, long after the office closed, we stayed late organizing spreadsheets and laughing over takeout containers. The kind of exhausted, satisfied laughter that only comes when you know you're building something that matters. A few months after we opened, the first ripple of my family's awareness arrived, not with an apology, but with a letter. A formal envelope, stiff and expensive, bearing my father's neat handwriting. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning disguised as reconciliation. Words like legacy and duty spilled across the page like oil slicks, slippery and shiny, but toxic underneath. He talked about misunderstanding, about sadness, about how much the family had suffered since my unfortunate choices, But never once did he mention the truth. Never once did he say sorry. I read the letter at my kitchen counter under the pale morning light, and when I was done, I tossed it into the recycling bin without ceremony. Some bridges aren't burned. Some bridges were never real to begin with. The next week, Tanner showed up, not at my apartment, not at the foundation, but standing awkwardly outside my office building during one of our open house events. He wore a wrinkled shirt and scuffed shoes and a look that was almost sheepish, a look I had never seen on him before. For a second, the old ache tried to creep back in, the desperate part of me that used to crave their approval like oxygen, but it was quieter now, easier to silence. I met him at the curb, arms crossed, not offering him an easy way in. He shuffled his feet, glancing at the window where bright posters shouted phrases like "Financial freedom starts here and know your worth." "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. I heard about what you're doing. It's good work." He hesitated, fumbling for words that didn't come easily to someone who had always been handed everything and never learned the language of effort. I didn't soften. I didn't snap. I just nodded once and said, "Good to know," before turning and walking back inside without offering him more. Growth isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the simple, quiet choice to walk away without bleeding all over a wound that's already healing. Tanner didn't follow, he didn't call. And that silence felt like the truest conversation we had ever had. That winter, the foundation grew faster than I had dared to hope. Donations came in from unexpected places. Small checks with handwritten notes attached from former clients, local businesses, strangers who had heard about our work through word of mouth. Ray found us a grant from a women's advocacy group that allowed us to open a second location across town, closer to communities that had been systematically ignored for decades. We expanded our programs to include free legal workshops on tenant rights, small business mentoring circles, emergency childcare grants. Every new offering was a tiny act of rebellion against the system that had tried to convince people like us that surviving was all we were meant to do. Late one evening, long after the last volunteer had gone home and the city hummed softly beyond the frost-covered windows, Ray and I sat in the empty conference room sipping lukewarm tea from mismatched mugs. She flipped through a folder of grant applications, her brow furrowed in concentration, while I stared at the wall where we had taped up pictures from our first few months, clients smiling shyly over their certificates, teenagers grinning proudly with their first budgets in hand, Amara beaming next to a pile of donated laptops. "Do you ever think about what they lost?" Ray asked suddenly, not looking up from the papers. "Your family, I mean." I thought about it. I thought about how they had gambled with my loyalty, treated my love like a credit line they could overdraw endlessly without consequences. I thought about how they had pushed and pulled and taken and demanded until the person they thought would never leave had finally stood up and walked out the door. "They didn't lose me," I said quietly. "They threw me away when I stopped being useful." Ray nodded, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Their loss," she said simply, and we left it at that. Spring thawed the city slowly, slush giving way to tiny, stubborn crocuses pushing up through the cracks in the sidewalks. The foundation threw a fundraiser gala in a borrowed community hall, decorated with paper flowers and string lights. Nothing fancy, everything heartfelt. I stood at the back of the room for a moment, just soaking it in, the hum of laughter and hope and real gratitude filling the air in a way no forced family gathering ever had. Vanessa was there too, handing out pamphlets with easy smiles, her sleeves rolled up, her makeup smudged slightly from the effort of actually working instead of posing for photographs. She had never apologized formally, but she had shown up every week, kept her head down, done the work, and somehow that meant more than any scripted apology ever could have. As I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to stories, promising more workshops and more grants, I realized something powerful. I had built a family here, not out of shared blood, but out of shared belief, out of mutual respect, out of the simple, radical act of choosing each other every day. There was no ledger here, no tally of debts owed or favors demanded. There was only what we built together, stone by stone, hand in hand. At the end of the night, as we packed up folding chairs and deflated balloons, Ray bumped my shoulder lightly and grinned. "You know, I think Grandma Louise would be pretty damn proud of you," she said. I smiled. A real one this time. Not the polite, tight one I used to wear like armor at family functions. I think she already was, I said softly. Ray raised her cup in a mock toast. To breaking cycles, she said. To building something better, I added. We clinked our cups together, the sound soft but sure. And for the first time in a long time, I felt not just free, but truly, deeply whole. I didn't just survive the betrayal. I didn't just outlast it. I transcended it, and that was the real victory. The seasons shifted again, soft and inevitable. The bitter wind of winter fading into a spring that felt different this time. Not just in the air, but in the way the world seemed to open up around me. I no longer woke up wondering when the next emotional ambush would come, no longer checked my phone out of habit expecting another message dripping with guilt or manipulation. The quiet was startling at first, like the sudden hush after a storm, but little by little, I learned how to live inside it. I filled the spaces once occupied by fear with new routines, early morning walks through the park, late-night conversations with Ray about everything and nothing, simple dinners shared with the friends who had stayed when the tides of convenience pulled others away. It wasn't the life I had once imagined for myself, the neat, tidy picture framed by family approval and sacrifice disguised as duty, but it was real, and it was mine. Langston and Hart thrived under the changes I implemented, not because I chased profits harder than my predecessors, but because I built it differently, focusing on sustainability, transparency, ethics over easy money. There were rough patches, of course, pockets of resistance from those who missed the old ways, who whispered about tradition and loyalty like spells meant to summon a past I had no interest in resurrecting. But in the end, results spoke louder than nostalgia, and more, people saw that a company could grow without gutting its people to do it. Every milestone we reached, every life we touched through the foundation, every quiet success that stacked on top of the last, felt like a conversation I was continuing with Grandma, one choice at a time. I didn't need her to be proud of me anymore because somewhere deep inside, I already knew she was. One bright Saturday in early summer, I stood outside the foundation's second location, a modest building painted cheerful yellow with wide windows that spilled sunlight across the floor. We were hosting a community block party to celebrate a year of service, a year of standing firm, a year of growing not just roots but wings. There were food trucks lining the street, kids running wild with painted faces, music floating lazily through the warm air. I wandered through the crowd, laughing, chatting, shaking hands, letting the joy soak into my skin like sunshine after a long winter spent braced against the cold. Somewhere near the bounce house, Ray found me, 2 lemonade cups in hand, her cheeks flushed from corralling volunteers. "You built this," she said, nudging my shoulder. "Don't you ever forget that." I smiled, tipping my cup against hers in a silent toast. For once, I didn't feel the need to downplay it, to shrug it off with false modesty. I accepted it, let it settle into my bones where so much self-doubt used to live. Later, as the crowd thinned and dusk painted the sky in bruised gold and soft purple, I sat on the curb with my shoes kicked off, watching the last of the vendors pack up. Vanessa plopped down beside me, stretching her legs with a groan. She had become a steady presence at the foundation, never asking for special treatment, just doing the work, and somewhere along the way, a tentative truce had blossomed between us, built not on apologies, but on action. "If you ever decide to run for mayor," she said, half serious, "you've already got my vote." I laughed, surprised by how natural it felt to laugh with her now. Not tight or guarded, but easy. "One miracle at a time," I said, and we sat there in companionable silence as the first stars blinked into existence overhead. Weeks passed, then months, and somewhere in the quiet steadiness of building this new life, an old truth crystallized into something unshakable. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you stop making yourself small to fit their needs. It's who stands beside you not because they expect something, but because they respect what you've built, because they love you enough to let you grow even if it means growing away from them. I didn't regret walking away from my parents and Tanner, not even on the nights when loneliness brushed against the edges of my mind like a ghost. Because loneliness in truth was better than company and lies. Because peace, real peace, wasn't about the absence of people. It was about the absence of fear. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. I wasn't afraid of being disliked. I wasn't afraid of building a life that no one else understood but me. One evening, just before the 1-year anniversary of Grandma's passing, I stood at the edge of the lake where she used to take me fishing as a kid, the water stretching out before me smooth and endless. I held a small piece of paper in my hand, a letter I had written to her, not because I believed she could read it, but because some things need to be said even if no one else ever hears them. I thanked her for trusting me, for seeing me when others only saw what they could take. I promised her that I was living the life she had always whispered about when we sat together on the porch, the life where I didn't have to beg for love or shrink myself to be accepted. Then I folded the letter into a paper boat, placed it on the water, and watched it drift out into the twilight until it disappeared. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. There was nothing left undone between us. Only gratitude. Only love. Only peace. Walking back to my car, barefoot in the cool grass, I realized something that wrapped itself around my heart like a promise. You don't have to fix the family that broke you to have a good life. You don't have to forgive people who aren't sorry to find peace. You don't have to carry the weight of their choices to walk freely into your own future. Healing doesn't come from waiting for them to say they were wrong. Healing comes when you stop needing them to. Today, my life is quieter than it used to be, but it is infinitely fuller. I spend my mornings drinking coffee in the sunlit kitchen of a small apartment filled with books and plants, and laughter that doesn't feel forced. I spend my days building futures instead of patching holes in a broken past. I spend my evenings walking through neighborhoods that once felt like cages and now feel like home. Ray still shows up every week with takeout and terrible jokes. Vanessa and I still rib each other over who can raise more donations in a month. Sometimes, Tanner's name floats into conversations like a leaf caught in a breeze, and I don't flinch when it does. The girl who once said yes to everything so she wouldn't be abandoned has finally learned the power of saying no. The girl who once kept giving until there was nothing left has finally learned how to keep some things for herself. The girl who once believed that love had to be earned through sacrifice has finally learned that real love asks for nothing but your full, authentic self. And if there's one thing I know for sure now, it's this. You are allowed to outgrow the people who refuse to grow with you. You are allowed to choose yourself even when it means losing others. You are allowed to build a life that makes no sense to the people who only loved you when you were convenient. Family is not blood. Family is not duty. Family is not the weight of someone else's needs shackled to your dreams. Family is the people who see you, really see you, and love you enough to never ask you to be less. I am Madison Hart. I survived the fire they lit under my feet. I walked through it. I built something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. And I did it without ever needing to burn myself down to keep them warm. Story 2, Diana is my name. I grew up in Cedar Hill, a little town with summers that smelled of warm apple pie and fresh grass and winters that brought harsh, piercing winds. However, my early recollections were never as pleasant as the summers when I was 6 years old and my younger sister Madison was born. My parents gave me a hug and assured me that I would always have a best buddy. They failed to mention that I was no longer visible in my own house. I recall Madison's return home day. Mom had a full table set up in the living room, complete with cards, cake, and balloons. I was instructed to move aside. Diana, don't touch anything. All of this is for Madison. Mom, she murmured, sounding more like an order than a suggestion. My sister seemed to be the center of attention in the family after that day. Madison was my father's princess and my mother's little angel. I was the only one completing my assignments, scrubbing the floors, and pouring water. Mom prepared Madison's favorite breakfast every morning, pancakes in the shape of a heart with sliced strawberries and maple syrup. I received a frigid glare and a cold slice of bread. I once had to get new glasses because I was losing my vision on the board in class. Make do with the old ones, Dad murmured, glancing at me. It's almost Madison's birthday. We must put money aside for a large cake. I didn't answer, just gave a silent nod. Madison requested a pink bicycle with a flower basket 2 weeks later. Dad did not flinch when he gave them his credit card. I had believed that I was just overly sensitive and that I was seeing things. However, the truth hit me hard when I was 12. Only one kid from the entire school receives this accolade, and I made it to the state finals of a writing competition. I eagerly presented my mother the invitation in the hopes of receiving compliments. After giving it a quick look, she placed it in the sink. This Sunday is Madison's birthday celebration. Make an effort to get there by yourself. I'm occupied, so I went by myself. Holding my manuscript printed on an outdated printer, I rode the bus for 2 hours. Even though I lost, I will always remember it. I sat in silence in the auditorium, feeling as though I were on another planet, while my classmates cheered on by their families. The finest gowns, the priciest toys, and our parents' unwavering love were all given to Madison as she grew up. She became accustomed to controlling me and taking stuff from me without asking. When she made a mistake, she blamed me and was always protected. Diana, don't be self-centered. Mom used to say, Grandma mailed me a new jacket, but I wouldn't let Madison take it. It is required for Madison's birthday celebration. The old one is yours to wear. I discovered how to be quiet, to swallow my annoyance, and to take solace in reading, homework, and exam results. Every time I aced. The only place I could breathe was school, where I was free to be myself. I created a small, peaceful world for myself, one where I could feel loved without having to ask. And I vowed to myself before I was even 13. I would leave Cedar Hill one day. I would leave Madison's shadow behind and never turn back. My essay on growing up invisible helped me get a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. For the first time, my heart pounded when I clutched the acceptance letter in my hands. I had been noticed and appreciated by someone, even if it was only a panel of strangers. That night, expecting for an embrace, I set the letter on the dinner table. Congratulations. My mother remarked, That's nice. However, Madison is going to the Town Art Center this weekend to try out for the junior singing group. We must all pay attention to her. Let's not alter the atmosphere. She continued to fry the chicken without even looking up. I gave a nod. I no longer felt depressed, simply hollow, as if their disregard no longer stung since I had been neglected for so long. I just had one little bag and lofty aspirations when I left Cedar Hill that fall. I poured myself into my studies and majored in marketing, where strategy and creativity collided. Nobody showed up to bid me farewell. No embrace, no farewell party. But I felt confident when I got on the bus because I knew I was finally going down a different, my own route. I felt like a new person in college. I was never referred to as Madison's sibling, as Diana Brooks. I was the student who always raised her hand first in class, came up with the most audacious ideas for group projects, and received comments from instructors stating that her presentation was above expectations. At a cafe close to my hostel, I found a part-time job. I worked in the afternoons, studied in the mornings, and remained up late to do homework. No weekend getaways or spring break. However, I had a strategy. Get a semester ahead of schedule and start working as soon as possible. I stayed on college to work as a research assistant for a professor who studies consumer behavior while my classmates went home for the holidays. The location I called home never felt like home, so I chose work above family. I received a full-time offer from Harper & Lane, one of the leading marketing companies in the area, where I had interned during my junior year summer, 3 years after I graduated with honors. I relocated to Chicago, got a modest apartment in the West Loop, and began constructing a new life away from my mother's disapproving gaze and Madison's shadow. I entered the office every morning, sat at my desk at the window on the 12th story, and gazed out at the bustling streets with a sense of calm. When Madison took painting and music lessons, I was no longer the kid hiding behind the curtain. I was a recognized woman with a voice and the ability to make her own decisions. Mom would sometimes text me, and it would always be about Madison. She works as an intern at a clothing company. Or Madison was performing for the mayor on television. Have you noticed? She never once inquired about my well-being. She never once brought up my work or the accomplishments of my labors. That's great, I would respond. Congratulations to her, and set my phone aside. I once presented a campaign called Human Brand at a crucial internal meeting, integrating emotional connection into all aspects of marketing. There was silence in the room. The director then gave a nod. This campaign is a huge success. Diana, you forced me to examine myself. I got home that evening and opened my laptop to view my first-year performance bonus on the business dashboard. 6 figures. I sobbed because someone finally told me you moved people, not because of the money. In order to see that email every morning, I printed it out and taped it to the refrigerator, something my childhood home lacked. And keep in mind that I did this. Then my phone rang one weekend afternoon while I was reading by the window. "Mom calling," said the screen. I gazed at it. I was curious, but I wasn't going to respond. What did she want after all these months? It turned out to be a formal, stiff invitation to Madison's engagement celebration. "You ought to attend." She said the entire family would be present. As though I were no longer a member of the family, I intended to say no. However, I managed to say yes. Perhaps the first needed to find closure. Perhaps I simply wanted to witness firsthand Madison's brilliance as the show's star. Like a stranger in my own family, I went back to Cedar Hill and sat in silence in the far corner of the celebration. Nobody inquired about my work or Chicago life. For the sake of appearances, Mom spoke to me in gentle, surface-level tones, but one individual stood out. The groom's best friend is Andrew. He was an Austin-based freelance photographer who was briefly back in town for a community project. We ended up texting for hours after the party, even though we had only spoken for a few minutes. I had never met a man like Andrew. He didn't view me as Madison's sister or as a performance evaluation or resume. He gave me a direct look and listened intently. He moved to Chicago with 2 stray cats and an old camera one late autumn day after we began a long-distance relationship he was fostering. Before he could even kneel, I accepted his proposal a year later on a soggy afternoon. "Yes," I blurted out. All the way home, we laughed. Because we both pursue our passions, marriage hasn't always been easy. But even if it's just a steaming cup of coffee when I wake up, Andrew never fails to make me feel loved. Or a sticky note on my laptop that says, "You're still amazing." Today we welcomed our son, Elliot. When I was 32, a little boy with his father's gray eyes and a smile that made me feel like I wasn't missing anything in life. I used to fear motherhood, afraid I'd repeat the way my mother treated me. But Elliot taught me that love isn't something you have to fight for. It's something that blooms naturally when you truly want the best for someone. Those first nights, I walked around the living room holding my baby, lulling him to sleep with soft jazz playing in the background. Andrew would usually sit at the corner table editing photos, but he always looked up whenever I sighed. "Let me change the diaper," he'd say, like it was a rescue. And I realized that was the family I had once dreamed of. Elliot grew up in a small apartment filled with drawings and storybooks, where every cry was met with patience, not frustration. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough so that Elliot would never have to ask, "Mom, do you love me?" Like I used to wonder for years. But everything started to shift when Elliot turned 3. Andrew accepted a major project in Seattle, one that would last 6 months. I supported him going. His career meant just as much as mine. But the space began to widen between us. Calls grew shorter. Answers to SMS came slower. Then one Tuesday night, right after I put Elliot to bed, Andrew phoned Diana. "I think we need to discuss." He paused. "I've met someone in Seattle." It didn't start off serious, but now I didn't weep. I didn't shout. I just felt a familiar emptiness rush over me like an old song. It was the same hollow sensation I'd gotten when my mom brushed over my successes to praise Madison. And now it was back in a different form. The man I loved most had taken a route that didn't include me or Elliot. Andrew apologized over and over. He insisted he would still be a responsible parent, that he'd support Elliot, that he wouldn't disappear. However, my kid and I were now the only members of the family I believed to be stable. I leaned against Elliot's cot and sat on the floor that night. Unaware that his world had suddenly changed, he slept peacefully. Even if it was just the 2 of us, I quietly vowed to him that I would not allow him to grow up the way I did. He was never an afterthought to me, as Elliot would know. He was everything to me, my love, and my top focus. Andrew packed up his belongings and moved out following that tragic call. No yelling or fighting. As softly as it had started, everything came to an end. The following morning, I was by myself in the kitchen, gazing at the vacant spot where his coffee mug had been. I kept myself from collapsing. Not for Elliot. He needed an adult who was capable of facing reality. It wasn't a mother who wept each time he slept. And just when I thought everything was about to come apart, something unexpected came from the last place I expected it to. The family of Andrew. Sarah, Andrew's mother, Diana, called me the very following day. She murmured quietly over the phone. He told us everything. We're at a loss for words, but we do know this. This family still includes you and Elliot. I silently held the phone for a long time. Just for a second. I had assumed that when Andrew left, everyone on his side of the globe would abandon me as well. However, they didn't. I was still referred to as darling by Sarah. It seemed like a lifeline at that precise moment. The next weekend, Andrew's father, Tom, dropped over with a bag full of Elliot's old favorite toys from their home. Grinning, he leaned down to Elliot's level and held out an old toy truck. "I took this small child to come see you because he claimed he missed you." As if nothing had happened, Elliot shrieked and gave Tom a hug. And the fact was that love had remained the same with my kid. Not at all. Rachel, Andrew's younger sister, who had always been the quiet one, brought handmade ginger cookies and a little t-shirt to visit on a chilly, wet Saturday afternoon. But it was Rachel who moved me to tears. "Nevertheless, my aunt is fantastic. I will always be Elliot's aunt," Rachel added, "even if we are no longer sisters-in-law." Unable to say, I nodded. After that, Elliot was taken to see his grandparents every weekend. He learned how to bake from Sarah. He learned how to plant tomatoes in the backyard from Tom. He would spend hours sitting with Rachel drawing. I dubbed them magic classes. It was his second home, according to Elliot. Sarah invited me to join her for supper one late afternoon when I came to bring Elliot up. My former seat from when I was a member of the family was still on the dining table. However, I wasn't Andrew's wife this time. I was myself. A single mother was greeted with kindness and sincere regard. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder as we were done cleaning the dishes. "I'm aware of your strength, Diana, but strength does not entail working alone." I was permanently engraved with those phrases. They weren't sympathetic. They served as a reminder of my companionship. When Elliot turned 4 a few months later, I had a little birthday celebration at a local park. Only Andrew's whole family, a few close friends, and coworkers. Sarah gave me a hug and said, "Even though we are not blood relatives, our hearts still choose you," as Elliot extinguished his candles. Elliot put his arms around my neck when I put him to bed that night. "I adore you, Mommy. I also adore Aunt Rachel, Grandma, and Grandpa." My tears soaked onto his pillow as I hugged him tight. I might have lost a husband, but I got something far more valuable instead. A true family. One is constrained by choice rather than titles. My son's little face was glowing in the nightlight as I watched him sleep. I vowed in silence, I will never allow him to grow up without affection no matter what. And in the event that the world abandons me once more, I'll make it better, only to maintain his visibility. The cadence of life with Elliot became steady and peaceful over time. I went above and above in my work at Harper & Lane. I was elevated to creative director for the Midwest after 2 consecutively successful ads for well-known companies. Most people in the industry take 10 years to achieve this position. I joked that I dubbed my post-divorce paradise because I used my first bonus to put down the cash on a modest house in the Naperville suburbs with a sun-filled home office and a backyard large enough for Elliot to run about. A week following the move, my phone rang. My mother, who had all but disappeared following Madison's engagement party, was displayed on the caller ID. "I heard you purchased a home, Diana." "That's incredible." Unusually upbeat, her voice chirped over the phone. "If it's okay with you, we'd love to come visit." After a brief pause, I said yes gently, in part, out of interest. In part due to Elliot. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon with a box of ginger cookies and a tiny gift bag. Mom gave Elliot a hug as if she had never missed his birthday before. Dad was constantly praising the new kitchen, the refrigerator, and even the rug in the hallway. Elliot was immediately amiable because his young heart had not yet been broken by rejection. He gave them a tour of the house, showed them his drawings, and even gave Grandma a paper crown he had made himself. Uncertain whether my heart should melt or freeze, I stood apart. My parents got more involved in the coming weeks. On the weekends, they offered to watch Elliot for a couple of hours so I could relax, even brought pastries with them when they came to visit. Elliot started phoning my mother, Grandma Linda, of course, and he would enthusiastically recount how Grandpa gave him candies from his coat pocket or how she told him fairy stories. I tried to encourage myself to accept it. Perhaps everyone should be given another opportunity. Then, however, the thing I had always feared began to manifest. It started with a seemingly innocuous dinner chat. "We're fixing the roof, Diana. All winter long, it has been leaking." With a sigh, my dad looked about my light-filled kitchen. "It must be going great for you at work. We would much appreciate any assistance you could provide." I gave a nod. Just a few $100 was all that was involved. I sent it. Consider it an expression of gratitude for the concern they were beginning to demonstrate. Next followed a late utility payment, the broken old refrigerator, and Mom's dentist expense. I tried not to pass judgment. Like a responsible adult, I sent money. I'm not the forgotten kid I once was. However, my LinkedIn article became viral in the business one day after I closed a big transaction with a Silicon Valley firm. In less than 24 hours, my mother texted me, "Congratulations, my love. Your dad is considering purchasing a used SUV for the winter, by the way. Much more secure. It would be great if you could assist with the down deposit." My heart fell as I read the message. No one inquired about Elliot at all. No, I'm grateful for the assistance I've already provided. Another request, please, as if I were their speed dial personal bank. I took a while to reply. I needed time to reflect. Elliot stated, "Mom, Grandma gave me Madison's old toy today, while he was folding his clothes for school the next day. However, Madison always took great care of it, so she advised against breaking it." His eyes were serious as he glanced up at me. "I prepare my toys for donation, Mom." My chest had a little cut, and I froze. Favoritism has persisted throughout. It had recently undergone a shape alteration, still acute enough for a 4-year-old to sense, but softer and more subdued. I took a seat and embraced Elliot. "Yes, dear. I'm proud of you every day for taking such good care of your toys." I picked up my phone that evening and wrote my mother a single sentence in response. "I apologize, but all I construct going forward will be for Elliot rather than to make up for what you never provided me." I had no idea how she would react, but I was certain of one thing. I would not allow my son to repeat the past. Never again. It started like any other day. A sudden discomfort in my lower belly interrupted me mid-sentence as I was introducing the board to a new campaign. The rest of it unfolded like a fast-forward movie. I'm being helped out of the room by a colleague, someone shouting for assistance. The ambulance raced past intersections with flashing lights. Ivy was in my arm, bathed with cold perspiration. When I woke up in the emergency room, the physician seemed solemn. "You have severe appendicitis, Miss Diana. We must go to work right now. This cannot wait." All I could think of through the torture was Elliot. At 330 school finished, and he was in preschool. I looked at the time. Not even 2 hours. I must make a phone call. "My youngster needs to be picked up by someone," I muttered. They gave my phone to me. As I called my mother's phone, my fingers shook. In spite of everything, I secretly hoped that she would be the mother I had always imagined. On the 4th ring, she answered. "What's going on, Diana?" "Mom, I'm at the medical facility. I require urgent surgery. Could you come get Elliot?" "I am unable to." A pause occurred. Too chilly, too long. Then she spoke clearly. "Well, I doubt I can. Tonight, we're preparing for Madison's promotion celebration. The eatery is fully booked. There will be close to 60 attendees." But I made an effort to remain composed. I had the sensation that my insides were twisting. "I lie in a hospital bed, Mom. Someone has to come get Elliot. He is your grandchild." She let out a sigh. "Why do you constantly complicate things, Diana? We're rather busy. Elliot is also difficult to control since he is always rushing around asking questions. I don't believe it's a good idea to watch him today." Her remarks cut right through me. I repeated as I watched him, not believing what I was hearing. "You don't have to drop Elliot off. He is your grandchild." "But we can't manage him?" she answered icily and honestly. "He is a pain in the ass." That last statement sliced through all of my previous scars. She hung up after that. My body was numb as I dropped the phone. I couldn't decide which stung more. The way my mother had just cut the final thread binding us together, or the irritated appendix. Just as they carted me away, a nurse hurried in to get me ready for surgery. I was able to phone Andrew's sister, Rachel, one more time. She picked up right away. "Rachel, I'm at the medical facility. I require surgery. At 330 Elliot's school lets out. Are you able to?" "I'm leaving immediately." Without hesitation, she said, "Text me the address of the school. Tonight, Elliot will remain at my house. Seeing him will make Tom and Sarah very happy." I sobbed because a light appeared just as all the doors seemed to slam shut, not because I was in pain. The procedure went well. There was a picture beside me when I woke up, and gentle light was shining from the ceiling. Beside Rachel and her dog, Billy, Elliot was beaming broadly. There was a statement underneath in blue marker. "My sleep was excellent. To show his affection for you, Mama. Bully shared his blanket. Elliot." Rachel brought me up from the hospital 2 days later. Within the vehicle. Silently, she said, "Diana, there is one thing that I understand, but not our parents. Elliot doesn't cause trouble. He is light. How about you? You are everything to him." I removed all of the pictures of my biological family from the walls that evening when I got home. I swapped them out for pictures of Elliot having fun in his grandparents' backyard. I didn't require an explanation. All I had to do was prevent Elliot from falling in love. There were restrictions on that. I also promised something. I would never allow anybody to treat me again after that. My son is not as good, regardless of the title they held. I recovered from surgery more quickly than I had anticipated, in part because my body was resilient, and in part because during those peaceful days of recuperating at home, I had gotten the most glaring wake-up call of my life when I was in the hospital. I had plenty of time to think about Madison, myself, my parents, and my mom. With a family that never considered her anything more than a contingency plan, the lady had been much too patient. When Elliot had gone to sleep the night I got home, I turned on my laptop, went into my bank account, and stopped all of the automatic transfers to my parents. I created a new savings account for Elliot and took them off of the beneficiaries list. I called it the Freedom Fund because I understood that freedom isn't always about escaping someone. It's about taking back control of your life. I banned my mother's phone the following day, followed by my father's. To be kind, I banned all of their social media accounts, emails, and messages. I no longer had to be courteous. Both Elliot and I craved peace. I received a handwritten note in the mail a week later. My mother attempted the old-fashioned method since she knew I wouldn't return her calls. A cream envelope. The first 3 pages are written in that familiar suite of cursive. At the end, guilt tripped me in the middle and blamed me. She wrote that they were in severe financial problems since Emma was unable to assist. As was to be expected, that Dad had been turned down for a loan for a new car, and that if they couldn't pay the winter bills, the house would be foreclosed. What about the last line? "Our only hope is you." I didn't read the letter again before folding it. I had been there before. Not because they loved me, only hope, since I was helpful. My mother contacted Rachel a few days later and asked her to deliver a message. Rachel declined. Diana stated that she owes no one an explanation, particularly not those who earlier referred to her child as a burden. Then Madison sent a message. "You know you're being theatrical. Even if our parents committed faults, they are still our parents." Elliot and I were in the backyard growing tomatoes when I got the message. His hands were smeared with dirt, and he laughed while sporting a humorous little knit cap. I had just answered, "You will comprehend when you have children. I haven't had a call or mail since that day." Perhaps they finally understood that I've changed from the Diana of old who would give up all for a single crumb of approval. Instead of pleading for affection, I've learned to start making my son and myself secure. A month later, Elliot and I ran into his old preschool instructor at the park when we were out on a stroll. "You seem healthier and happier than I've ever seen you," she continued, glancing at me. I grinned. The most significant lesson of my life was recently taught to me. Not all of your blood relatives are actually family. Elliot was watching cartoons while cuddled up in my lap in the evening. Looking up, he said, "Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa come visit anymore?" I ran my fingers through his hair and gave him a firmer hug. "Because you deserve to be loved unconditionally, without restrictions, and I want to shield you from those who don't." Elliot gave a nod and resumed watching his television as if nothing had changed. In the most straightforward manner, but that moment was the most obvious indication to me. I had made the correct decision. How my parents are doing right now is unknown to me. I'm not sure if they still want me to return or if they have completely refocused their expectations on Madison. I never check in. I don't inquire. Since I no longer live for approval, I don't care. I'm here to make sure Elliot understands that true love never compromises one's dignity. Elliot and my life. After all the hard decisions, after all the cutbacks, it feels light. I feel lighter because I don't have to worry about being accepted anymore. Not because I don't still have difficult days, sleepless nights from work, or unexpected fevers. Stop recoiling with every phone contact or message from folks who used to call themselves family. We began reconstructing our lives in our own unique manner. Coffee was brewing in the early mornings while Elliot sketched at the kitchen table. Tom and Sarah's Sunday supper. Sarah knew just how much sauce I liked, and Tom always prepared Elliot's favorite BBQ. Rachel, who always had a camera about her, took the most stunning pictures of this small family. I never imagined that I would. After a day of gardening, Elliot sat with crayons and sketching paper on the porch steps. He was drawing a large tree with broad limbs. "There is a person in each branch." "What kind of tree, sweetie?" I said. "A tree of relatives?" Elliot pointed to each in response. "You are this. I am this person. Grandpa Tom is this person, Max, Aunt Rachel, and Grandma Sarah." Rachel recently adopted a tiny puppy named Max, Elliot's best friend now. It dawned on me then that there was not a single old name. On that tree from those who hurt us emerged. No Linda. No Madison, no James. Elliot made the decision to choose his family while he was sound asleep at night. In the living room, I would frequently sit by myself. The hardwood floor is being illuminated by a gentle golden light. I remember being the silent girl at the door at Cedar Hill, watching Madison receive all the acclaim while I was left with a bowl of cold breakfast. I was no longer standing behind any doors. I had taken a risk, made my own way, and created a happy household. I didn't require approval from anyone. Rachel and I brought Elliot to Central Park for the fall festival one day. Rachel smiled as he invited her to ride the horses. Today's official photographer is Aunt Rachel. She photographed Elliot and many. The golden fall light glinted in his eyes. I was cleaning up that night when Elliot gave me a surprise back hug and said, "Mom, do I really have a family?" I knelt down to his level after turning around. "What are you saying, my love?" A school child stated. "I live alone after my parents got divorced. But I'm not by myself, am I?" I choked as I gave him a deep hug. "You're not alone, darling. I'm yours. Grandma, grandfather." "Max, you are loved more than anything in the entire world, Aunt Rachel." As though he needed to hear it one last time to believe it, Elliot gave a firm nod. "After that, I'll sketch a heart on our family tree." I brushed his hair and grinned softly. "And anytime you need me, I'll be the strongest branch you can rely on." The next several days went by without incident. I stopped searching for previous calls. No more waiting for past due excuses. Since I already had all I had ever desired, not by blood, but by conviction, I went with real affection. It decided to keep my son safe, and I made my own decision. Diana's tale serves as a potent reminder that not all people who are related to you should be included in your life. Duty is not the source of true love. It results from respect and choice. Not only do we rescue ourselves when we have the guts to end harmful relationships, we establish a healthy environment for the development of the following generation. Diana made the decision to love herself and her kid without conditions. A courageous, astute, and exquisite decision. How do you feel with Diana's choice? If you were in her position, would you have acted similarly? For more heartwarming tales about life and family, leave a comment below and remember to subscribe to the channel.